In this video, I'm going to sort of extend a previous example. There we looked at a simple hockey player class, and then we had another version where we looked at a hockey player data class. In this case, we're going to look at both the class and the data class, but we are going to sort of separate, sort of do three additional things. We're going to separate the files in which we are defining the class and using the class. So that will help us move towards a sort of more usual and better for reuse version of the program. And we're going to add a field that has a default value. And then we're adding one more method. So we want at some point to sort of add in the player's height, and we might want to do something with the height that involves it being a number, maybe get a BMI if we also have a weight, something like that. And but we're going to imagine that the data that we have is coming in sort of as a string version, like five five single quote space 11 double quote, sort of some kind of notation like that representing the height as a string, and then we want to convert it, do the parsing and separate it and do the conversion and get it into sort of all inches. Okay, so if you want this code, it's going to be found at the URL seen here. I'm going to show you first just the simple class version, and then show you the data class version, which is not much different, but there will be one or two differences, which I'll point out. Okay, for the sake of the parsing, I'm bringing in the regular expressions module. Here is my hockey player class. This is the class version. So I'm defining a constructor, a dunder init method. I have the ID, the first name and the last name. These are the properties we had before. And previously I had added the player num in as sort of an ad hoc property. And now I'm putting it here sort of more built into the class, but I'm giving it default value of 0, 0. So if you don't, you can say I know it at the time of the constructor and put it in, or you can say I don't know it and it will get assigned this value of 0, 0. And so just a standard constructor kind of stuff. ID, all these properties get assigned to the properties of the object of the class. I have a method to put together the first and last name to make a full name. I have something that constructs a URL from the first name, the last name, and the ID, along with some NHL.com precursor, so that then can be put in a web browser and open up to the page that shows this player. And then here is, and so one of the changes was this default value. Another change was this new method. I'm going to write this for now as an instance method. So I don't, in my constructor, I didn't have a height, but I'm going to create a player. And then once I have the player, I'm going to use this method to convert a string. This FTIN is feet and inches. It is the string that's going to come in. And then I'm going to convert it to height in all inches, and that will be an int. So here we go. We are using the regular expression, the RE module, and we are taking \s plus, so that is going to be any amount of white space, and replacing that sub or substitute, sort of the equivalent of replace in other languages, get rid of any amount of white space and replace it with nothing and make it. So take feet inches, take any white space in it, replace it with nothing, make it the new feet inches. And then again, this was something like 5'11", like this. So any space that might have been in the front or at the end or in between, and it didn't matter if it was a space, a non-breaking space, a tab, that should all be taken care of by the white space. Now I'm getting rid of the double quote, and same thing, substituting it with nothing. And then the last step in terms of string manipulation is I am splitting it based on the single quote, and that was between the feet and the inches. So it was here's that symbol, that delimiter between the feet and the inches. Now I got that into tokens, and tokens will be a string. So splitting refers that I'm working with strings, and then I get from it other strings, substrings. And so now I am taking the first token, which was the height in feet, the feet part, and I'm converting it to an int, casting it as an integer and multiplying it by 12. And then adding in, again, casting as int, the second token, and that will then get me my height in inches, and then I'm returning that. And then the other, so one change again was the default value. Another change was the addition of this new method. And the other thing is that I am separating the use. So this is all just definition of class. There's no using the class in this file. That is separated out into a different file. Okay. So in the beginning, this seems sort of more complicated. You have more files, but it's better in the long run for multi-user projects, reuse, and what have you. So now I want to use my class in this separate file, so I must bring it in, make it available. And it is, if I do this notation, it's from the name of the file, import what I'm importing. So I'm from hockey class only. That was the name of my file but it was like .py, but we dropped the py. We're importing hockey player, the name of the class. So now I've brought in this class to the second file, and here I am instantiating a player, and I'm showing here one commented out, one not. So here I said player 2 was a hockey player, and I put in an ID, a first name, a last name, and a player number. And so I can just I can just put in the values without naming them, and then I must respect the order of things. And so in that case, this was the Sean was the first name, this was the ID, that was the last name, this was the player number. I can also, when I am instantiating a player, since all these properties have names, I can explicitly put in the names, and then I don't have to obey the same order. So I can switch around the first name and the last name, for instance. And that didn't matter. And here, so I'm showing you that I can either have them not named, but I must respect the order, or I can name them, and if I'm naming them, I'm allowed to move them around. But I'm also showing you here that in the constructor, there was this player number now with the default value, but I can explicitly put in the value of 18, and then I'm printing out that player and using the dunder dict, the underscore dict, the dictionary, and showing it all the properties. Now I'm playing down here with the second hockey player that I'm making, or player 1, maybe it's the first. I'm putting in the ID, the first name, the last name, and going to show you the dictionary, and it will have the player number, but it will have the default value of 00, and then I will assign it the player number to 62, and then put it back in. And then I am going to use my convert height from string method. So I'm going to take this guy who's 5'11", and use, and he already exists. This is an instance method. So the player must exist. Player one does exist by this stage. And I am using this method to convert that string height to a height of all inches. And then I am assigning it that property sort of as an ad hoc property. And then I'm printing out that property, and then I'm printing out that player's dictionary. So let's see that. So this again is the class version. And what do we have in our printouts here? Here was the first player two that I made. And he was assigned 14 from the start. I used the constructor and gave it a value for the player number. Here's player one, and player one, I did not, when I use the constructor, did not give a player number, so it was assigned the default value of 00, and then I assigned it a 62, and then I converted the height and found that it was 71 inches and added that as a property of my player. And so that was added to the dictionary for that player. So this is the class version. I'm going to now show the data class version. So all I've added, so here's the regular expressions, but now I have another import to bring in the data class and the field. And then I decorate my hockey player as a data class, and I moved the properties out of the constructor because I'm going to let the data class define the constructor for me. And so I just say there's an ID, which is going to be a string, a first name a string, a last name a string, a player number a string, and then the player number in the string, I'm going to say that it's got a default value of 00. And then I should, we saw this in the previous example of the data class. If I'm going to do a compare of a player, see if two players are the same player, I don't want the player number to be involved in the compare. So the player gets traded to a different team, he gets assigned a different number, but it's still the same player. So I don't want that in my compare. And compare is something that comes automatically with the data class, as is the sort of the representation, and so on. Full name is the same. URL is the same. Convert the height from the string is the same. So there's no, in the methods, there was no change. And the big change, and I didn't have to do it, but I took out, because that's one thing a data class does for you, is gives you the constructor. So take advantage. So that now is the change in the class, now a data class. And now here I am using it. And there's no sign over here, except in my name. My name of my file says data class, but there's no sign over here that it was a data class. I'm bringing in hockey player. And here I am making the hockey player. Again, this time I named the fields. Let me clear this out because that's from the class version. I can use a constructor. I didn't explicitly write a constructor, but it was written for me by the data class. But I can name them, and if I'm naming them, I can do my own order. And I'm showing you the dictionary just for comparison's sake with what I did on the other side. I'll do something at the end where I show you print out the player one versus the player one underscore dict. So we will see a difference at the very end. Take advantage of something that the data class gives us. But I'm just trying to make it as much like my class version as possible. So this is the version where I'm naming them, and I assign the number 14. Here I'm not explicitly naming the fields, so I must put them in the order that they appear in. And I'm not putting in the default value, so it's going to be to assign a player number of 00, spit it out, sign the number, spit it back out again, use my convert, and then assign that sort of ad hoc property to height in inches. And then I'm going to print it out in the dictionary. And then if you remember, if you've seen the other video, then one thing that a data class gives you is like a representation, and a dunder REPR. So it's going to, instead of just spitting out a memory location, if you say print the object, it will have a nicer version. But what I want to point out here is that the dictionary is going to show me all the properties, including this ad hoc height in inches that I've just added, whereas the representation that the data class made is only going to be the property sort of defined in the class and not anything ad hoc that was added. So points out in more than just format, a difference between dunder dict and dunder REPR repr. All right, so I should run this, and it's mostly the same. There's the first player 2 with the player number assigned from the start. Here's player 1, relying on the default value at first and then getting the 62 assigned. Here's the height that was converted from a string to an int, sort of a height in all inches. Here is the dictionary that includes that sort of ad hoc property of the height. And then here is the representation, and that does not have the height in there. So that's what I wanted to show you, just to move this example a little farther along, separate the class from the use of the class into 2 separate files, look at default values, and added an additional method. Thanks for your attention.